Evening and welcome once again to Gaming Under the Influence. I'm Mike here with Alex, coming to you from GreenDragonCVR in Woodbridge to talk about video games. How are you, pal?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
Not bad. Enjoying Death Stranding 2, which is shaping up to be a fine sequel.
Yep, me too.
Excited to hit the end and then hopefully make a video about that.
Yeah, I'm just behind you on that one, but we'll get there to the finish line and probably make a video about that.
Return to the topic, yeah. But as of today, there's something more pressing to discuss, and that's the seismic shift going down at Xbox.
Oof. Yeah, it's been a bit of a disaster.
Yeah, I mean,
coming out from the last few weeks there. We've kind of been ignoring this for a little while, but it's gotten...
In the past 2 years, a lot of stuff has gone down, and given the disproportionate influence they have over Western game development, it's probably worth a bit of an address, eh?
Yeah, I'd say.
Here we have that 9,000 employees were laid off just last week across all of Xbox, and this is the fourth major layoff at Xbox in just 18 months.
Oh, God.
I think I remember being particularly upset when Tango Gameworks was shuttered just a little while ago. That was Shinji Mikami's studio. I think he was gone from there at that point anyways.
Yeah, he was probably gone, but that was pretty much after releasing Hi-Fi Rush, which was a successful game.
Yeah, it was very successful, and the executives at Xbox, I think Phil Spencer and that big guy, what's his name? Aaron Greenberg. Yeah, they both praised it in public, but unceremoniously pulled the plug on the studio just after that, and I think the studio was saved by an outside investor, but nonetheless it was a tragic situation, and that kind of thing has repeated itself here. We have the Initiative being closed, Perfect Dark was apparently canceled. The one that I was most upset about was Rare being hit with layoffs and Everwild being canceled.
Everwild, yeah, which is actually one we were looking forward to.
Yeah, we were looking forward to that, although we haven't seen anything about it since it was announced, essentially. But
yeah,
it was pretty exciting. I remember seeing the trailer at this Xbox showcase some years back, concluding with you, wow, like the ship is turning course. They might actually have something.
Yeah, exactly.
Turns out it's not going to happen.
That's canned. They lost a long time. The
director of Banjo-Kazooie and Sea of Thieves, he's gone. 50% of Turn 10 was laid off, and we have King and ZeniMax also hit with layoffs, and the new ZeniMax Online. It was an MMO.
There was another MMO in development that's being canceled since they already own WoW and the Elder Scrolls Online. I guess they don't feel the need to own a third MMO.
It's funny because it's another one Phil Spencer was talking about recently in public, saying how much he enjoyed it.
You have to wonder if Phil's just a dummy who likes games, who his boss tells him to cancel and cut all these studios. This might be coming from higher up at Microsoft.
Yeah, it does seem like there's some disconnect between what they say one day to the next,
Yeah.
It leads you to believe maybe the people who are the front face of the company aren't as well informed as they should be about what's going to need to happen. But
yeah, strange stuff.
9,000 people overall, and most tragically, like a number of storied studios with interesting histories, and we had reason to look forward to their games. Their games aren't going to come out anymore at all. And
this is a really big nuke in the Western game development side of things.
Yeah, like an industry that was already suffering.
Yeah, it's just been turmoil, and there's studios in like Asia are flourishing, and they're popping up all over the place. They're
hiring a lot, and it's not. I think even CD Projekt Red was announcing that they're hiring. There's a number of Western studios that are sort of outside of this AAA bubble that are not doing so poorly, but it does seem like a lot of companies like Xbox, even if they're not comparable in terms of budget, like EA and Ubisoft and stuff, there also has been a lot of layoffs there in the past couple of years.
Yeah, the West has been just a really disaster. It's been a wild west of bad games and layoffs. Yeah,
journalists talking about another crash like there was some time ago, and I can see that, man. It does look that way to me. And it leads you to ask yourself, like, what's going on? How did they let this happen? Like this company that just a couple of years ago spent upwards of $100 billion.
Yeah, it was like $100 billion or something
to procure Activision Blizzard and
FTC freaking meetings and all kinds of
all that drama over whether or not it would it would establish a monopoly,
litigation and all this stuff, just so they could get it approved. And now it seems like they've essentially added all these games to their back catalog on Game Pass, and then
decided to shutter the studios.
Pulled the plug on any new creative endeavors, right? Like it's just,
it does, like, just at a superficial level make you question if they looked at that investment as a way to procure new games in the future, or just to acquire the back catalog for their subscription service.
I think it was the latter. I think it was to bolster up Game Pass, or maybe they wanted to bolster up Game Pass and they thought the numbers would go up, then they would continue to fund games. Maybe, I don't know, but either way, it just hasn't happened that way.
Yeah,
so
it hasn't panned out one way or the other.
I have heard that they thought they would have more subscribers than they do.
Yeah, I've heard
but
that too. That
how much growth can you expect? You know, like
I've heard now they wanted something more than that. I believe they had 35 million last they announced it, and I heard that by the end of 2030 or something, they wanted to have 100 million, and they expected they'd be closer to that by this point. But
that's a tough sell.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen as things are going. You know, you got to figure the people who are interested in that type of gaming, the market has probably a hard upper limit.
Yeah, I mean, most people, you know, let's say have an Xbox and subscribe to Game Pass. Like, how many, you know, it's already in, like you said, 30 something million. How many more million do you think you can get on board? Like, it's just unrealistic.
Like, you hear about games like Elden Ring, one of the biggest games in the space, selling like 12 million copies or something like that. And admittedly, it's not the most popular style of game, but you got to figure, you know, is there really a customer base for this style of experience in excess of double the sales of Elden Ring, let's say, or something like that? Right?
No, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to, but, you know, I think it brings us back to something we talked about a couple of years ago, and that seems to be the incompatibility between Microsoft's business model, their main revenue source, or at least what they want to be, which is Game Pass's subscription service, and their ability to function as a traditional publisher of AAA video games. You know?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be driving.
Yeah. And this Rafael Colantonio, the guy from Arcane, he was involved in, I think, Prey and the first Dishonored. He spoke out recently on Twitter saying that, you know, Game Pass is the elephant in the room nobody's talking about, that it's an unsustainable model, increasingly damaging the industry. He says it can't coexist with other models and they'll either kill everyone else or give up. It sounds dramatic, but I think at least within the part of the industry that Microsoft controls, it's inevitably true. And, you know, there's a couple of...
Sorry.
Continue.
I think people just probably are just enjoying it too much to give a shit and just kind of let the industry self-destruct. But
yeah, I mean, from a consumer standpoint, you know, it's not something that you would find objectionable, paying less to access something to access more things, ultimately, right? But I think it's easy to see why, like, even speculatively, without delving into examples or anecdotes from anybody, like, it's easy to understand why, you know, for two reasons I think that are related, that it's not compatible with games as we grew up understanding them, right? And the first one is that, obviously, you know, can you expect to recoup the budget of a modern AAA game via, you know, via a steady trickle of subscription revenue? Yeah. Probably not, right?
No, it doesn't make sense.
People talk about how, like, you know, Grand Theft Auto is coming out soon. It's costing. How much does that cost?
It's gonna be one of the most expensive piece of entertainment ever produced. I don't remember specific numbers.
Lots of money. Even years ago, man, the first Destiny game, which you would figure would be the kind of game suitable to Game Pass, if anything was.
Maybe $1 billion even.
It cost like over $100 million. Yeah. $200 million, I remember reading. So.
And that's why the initial sales period of a full price game is like the most important thing to recoup as much as possible, you know.
Yeah, it is.
It doesn't work any other way. That's the only way it's worked.
There are, you know, exceptions where like No Man's Sky, for example, where years after launch, they're still making additions and tweaking it, and they have like bursts of sales. But nonetheless, there's no way that, you know, you can expect something to be made like, let's say, Death Stranding 2, which we're enjoying right now, for a service like this, so long as anybody is concerned with the math working out, right? At the end of the day, it just can't happen.
There's no way to make it work,
A lot of people have been talking about how Microsoft has sustained this by like an injection of money from without, which eventually has to stop, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
I was reading too in this same article about Rafael Colantonio's statements that somebody from Larian Studios also said that that's why they prefer models favored by other publishers in the industry, where you have a subscription maybe, but day one it doesn't include new games, right?
It's more of a
back catalog
legacy
kind of
back catalog, exactly. And that I agree with. I think that's the best use for it.
Yeah, when you're not going to sell something anymore, it makes sense to try and make a little bit of money off of that same thing, right?
Especially with the way things are with backwards compatibility these days. You know, your PS5 or whatever, let's say, can't play PS1 games, your new Xbox can't play original Xbox games, throw them on the service. You know, like,
I think so.
It's great.
I think that's, you know, with a subscription service.
Nintendo does it too, actually.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, I imagine everybody's going to have something like this at the end of the day, but it seems like self-evident to me that you can't expect something with a giant budget, which many AAA games nowadays require, to be published for a service like this if
Yeah.
anybody's concerned with recouping their investment, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to lead to those kinds of things not being made as much, or the studios making them being shut down.
Exactly.
Simply, right?
Yeah,
And that's what's happened over and over again.
What's happened.
You know. And interestingly enough, like where Microsoft does still own a studio that's making games like this, even if they don't cost, you know, as much as Grand Theft Auto, like Outer Worlds 2 is coming out
Yeah.
from Obsidian, but it's coming out on PlayStation as well, right? Doom Eternal was also sold on PlayStation and on PC, where it's probably generated most of its sales, to be honest with you, right?
They make more money that way. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day,
That's right. You know, would those games be made if they couldn't sell them on PC and if they couldn't sell them on Steam and on PlayStation? Unlikely. I think,
yeah.
right? You know, and that's probably why developers like that are still allowed to make games of that nature while functioning within this ecosystem. But like Cole Antonio says, I don't think this model, supposing it's going to become total, can coexist with other things.
Yeah.
You know, it seems to me that if it becomes the dominant way of distributing entertainment software, then what you're going to see instead of the kind of stuff we're used to, you know,
it seems like the ultimate trade-off is like big budget first party titles, which Xbox is somewhat abandoning, you know, in favor of this subscription service where they just put all the new games on it anyway.
That's right.
So like, because Sony, you know, and PlayStation, essentially they still do their big budget games, but they're doing the opposite where you still have to buy them
After like a year or two, maybe it'll come out on
and
the
then they'll
subscription.
put it on the service.
Yeah.
So this still enables them to make these high budget, at least for now. They're still able to make it work. To make,
there's
big,
a
massive
proportional
100
relationship between the revenue and the
Yeah.
budget of the game. At least that's what you got to shoot for, you
Yeah.
know. And just the other day we were reading about Shuhei Yoshida. They're talking about how like game producers, game publishers, they're investing in fewer AAA games because the cost from the PS4 to PS5 eras has doubled.
Yeah, and that's for what reason? It's not like I mean, yeah, the
Chasing graphical fidelity that nobody needs or
exactly
wants, probably, right?
It exists and it is there, but to what, you know?
Yeah.
It's incremental at this point. Like the graphics are obviously better than last gen than the PS4, but
whether or not we even care about that stuff, it remains though that they do cost more than before, and that being the case, it's not suitable to be distributed in this manner. Right?
Yeah, it doesn't need to be, you know, I don't know. I guess there's always going to be companies and studios pushing cutting edge graphics and whatnot, but it seems to just be not worth it. Essentially,
I agree.
Not worth.
I agree entirely.
Making any kind of game really, because it's just not worth the cost.
Yeah.
You know, what's the point?
So long as costs keep going up for those and other reasons, it's going to remain true that you can't recoup your investment via subscription distribution, you know?
And we've had graphic styles that, you know, have existed from 20 years ago that still look great today. So imagine the ones you can still do today that look amazing but aren't like cutting edge, right?
Yeah.
You know, just with clever use of shading and whatever. It's cell shading,
right.
overlays, whatever the heck they do these days.
That
the way
seems
Breath
to
of the
be
Wild
though,
was done. You know, look at Wind Waker like 25 years ago or whenever the heck it
look
was.
at Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, and those are modern
or
examples.
Xenosaga, or you know, any number of examples. Bravely Default, right? Like
there's tons.
But I think this is one of the easy to arrive at conclusions, you know, that this could have something to do with why these studios were shuttered, right? They bought all these companies that are making games that just aren't suitable to distribute via their favorite method of distribution. And eventually they're going to cut their losses, supposing they're set on the Game Pass model, and say, well, we don't need these guys, right?
Yeah, that's true. There's an ultimate clash there. Like, think about the games, I mean, that they ultimately bought to put on Game Pass, but a lot of them, you know, with Bethesda, let's say you're buying like a ton of long ass RPG games like Fallouts and Elder Scroll games and stuff. Like, yeah, it's great to have on the service, but are they going to invest another, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars for another? I mean, they are, like you said, for the ones that are releasing on other systems and on the PC and stuff, right? I mean, the exclusives, I guess, have been dead for a while at Microsoft because
it's true.
They've been releasing on the PC for years now, but
the only exception was Starfield, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But now they're
see another thing like that.
They're blowing it open now. Now they're just blowing it open. So everything is going everywhere. The PlayStation, Nintendo. You're gonna see games go to Nintendo. It's just gonna be they're a publisher now.
I think that just consolidates what we're saying, though, right? Like making games like that is not.
I think we came to this conclusion years ago, actually, before it even happened.
Lots of people did, man. Even that guy Strauss Zelnick at Take-Two, I believe.
Yeah.
I think they're involved in publishing the Rockstar games, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it should be.
He said this years ago. That, it's just not suitable. We can't make our games the way we make them and then give them away for a subscription cost, right? It doesn't make any sense.
$1 billion Grand Theft Auto 6 and then release it to 30 million people for $100 a year or whatever.
No, we're not suit dummies. We're not businessmen, but this seems pretty self-evident.
Yeah.
I think, though, there is something that hits closer to home to consider here, you know? That's about whether or not you can fund a game with subscription revenue, but there's also the consideration about if accessing things via subscription, you know, if you want to be playing games that require, let's say, 200 plus hour time investments, they demand your attention for months at a time. If playing that on a service that allows you access to hundreds of things at the same time makes any sense, right?
No, because then you won't play all the other stuff you're paying for too. It kind of actually detracts you from doing that, because you're like, hey, I'm paying to have access to all this stuff, and I'm just playing one stupid thing, right?
Like there's a sense of detachment in respect of the games that are on the service, I guess, that's cultivated by the fact that they're all just spread out before you like a buffet table. It makes sense.
It's the exact opposite of what we traditionally, you know, let's say buy a console day one or whatever, and then go home with a game or two and sort of invest all your time in those, because those are all you had and the cost was high to get into in the first place. So
some games they're not suited to being experienced, you know, piecemeal alongside hundreds of other things for a monthly fee, right? I think this kind of implies like superficial engagement with many different things in a short period of time, rather than like committed engagement with one thing for a long period of time.
It'd be good for like sports games that just get updated every year, that you maybe play when a buddy comes over or something, you know, play with your wife or whatever the heck.
You know, if you got to figure the kind of games that they engineer for these services will be like ongoing service games or games with repeatable components or annual releases, that kind of stuff, right? It's suitable to be consumed in this manner, but something like
100-hour RPGs aren't going to work.
The Witcher 3 or, you know, even Fantasia Neo Dimension, it cost $64, but it was a huge game. It took me more than a month to play.
Yeah, massive.
It's not the kind of thing that if you were subscribed, at least if you were subscribed and you accessed it via your subscription, you wouldn't play any of the other things on the subscription. There's a contrariety between, you know, the way that you play the game and the fact that you're accessing it via these means. And I think that probably hits closer to home for more people. Like, at the end of the day, who cares if a company is making money or can fund their things as long as you have access to them? But from your own perspective, it does breed this like superficial engagement with what you're playing to access it in that manner. And I think that that's another consideration that people might overlook here, talking about just the business aspects and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It tends to precipitate this like superficial engagement with the games you're playing ultimately. Yeah.
It seems like Microsoft really trying to topple the industry a bit.
We can expect, I think, if this becomes the dominant mode of distribution, that games will be made with smaller budgets, that they'll be compact, accessible, they'll be ongoing, you know. Their subject matter will be more like appealing to a popular audience.
Yeah. Well, that'll be Microsoft's thing, I guess. I mean,
yeah, it will. And it really, like, I don't know if we mentioned this already. I think we did, but it leads me to believe, like, when they bought these companies, they were more concerned with fleshing out the back catalog for their subscription service than with,
for sure.
They probably looked at it as, you know, even if they never make a game again, we're buying like all of the Elder Scrolls games.
We're gonna own all this, this history.
Yeah.
And then they can decide where to go from there, which games to remake or further advance, make sequels and whatnot, right, etc.
Yeah. I don't know. That's in my opinion like what has brought about these changes, this seismic shift inside of Xbox. Yeah, 9,000 people in just in a brief period of time. On top of that, who knows? I think I read something like there was 20,000 plus layoffs in the past 18 months in total across all these different instances of it happening. Right?
It wouldn't surprise me. We keep hearing about it over, and it's like you know, periodically every so often there's a shift and a bunch of people get canned, but it seems to be mostly a problem in the West. It's not nearly the same thing.
No, I don't think many Japanese publishers are committed to that model of distribution.
But that's the other thing, right? Exactly. Like Nintendo would never do it, and Sony doesn't seem interested in doing it, at least not at this point.
Yeah.
So they're on the other side of it, and things are a lot different on their end,
they
you
are.
know? So they have their own problems, and they're struggling. Like Square Enix has been struggling.
They have some problems too, for sure.
But, you know, not like this, at least.
They've been struggling to recoup the budget on their games because they don't seem to know who they're making the games for at the end of the day.
I think they screwed up with Final Fantasy 16 being a PS5 exclusive.
And I think with it being
that was
a very untraditional Final Fantasy.
That didn't help it either.
Arguably, even the 7 remake series is afflicted by this problem, right?
Yeah, 7 Rebirth had a whole new set of problems that I don't even want to.
Yeah. But in any case, if we have to speculate on why all this is happening, like that would be my opinion, that in the first place, like they just can't keep these studios around. They make stuff that's not suited to how they want to sell games now. On the other hand, like you can't expect games that are distributed on a subscription platform to be the kind of games you're used to playing, which these studios have historically made.
Yeah, that's the funny part. Yeah. Oh boy.
It's good for them to have all that stuff in their back catalog, but even the stuff that is there, can you expect people to engage with it the way that somebody would who bought it on day one and sat there?
No, I mean,
I personally wouldn't, right?
I'd purposely stay away from most gaming like subscriptions, only because I already have, a shelf of tons of games that are unopened, that like I have my own personal Game Pass behind me. Like if I pay for a service, then I'm gonna feel even more like, oh my god, I'm paying money for stuff I'm not, like I already buy a ton of games that I haven't played yet, so
for sure.
I don't want to like add to it essentially, right?
I do have the PlayStation one, and I use it to play things when they're on there, I guess, instead of going and taking the thing off my shelf.
Fair
and
enough.
Stuff, but
I usually get the basic just for the cloud saves, but even that I'm starting to think like I kind of don't want to pay for it.
I have this like neurotic tendency though, even if something is on there, that I want to have a copy of it for myself if I like it in any way.
Yeah,
if it's not something I'm just going to engage with superficially, I want to have it on the shelf, right?
That's actually a big problem for me, is like everything I play that I like, I want some kind of copy of it. If it's like an old game, it's like,
even if I'm emulating it, I want the old PS2 copy or something, right?
Yeah.
But it just speaks to the sense in which, like, when your engagement with the thing isn't superficial, you want there to be some degree of permanent access to it.
Yeah, you want to like,
you don't want to just flit in and out of it. You want to
contents, right?
Be able to refer to it at your leisure.
Like having a vinyl or a CD, same thing.
Exactly
game,
the same
right?
thing. Yeah, cool. I think that even leads to deeper questions about digital distribution in a general sense. Steam recently was sending warnings out about how when you buy something there, you're only actually buying a license to access the game for a limited period of time.
I think
and all this stuff. And it's like
they had to change some of the wording around that.
Yeah. But it just goes to show, like, even when it comes to that, like, you can ask questions about if it's the optimal mode to engage with this media.
Yeah.
Right. It's like having a book on your shelf, but somebody's going to take it away one day, and then you want to cite it, or you want to read a part of it that you enjoyed, or you want to even read it all again, and you just can't. Right?
It's terrible.
That's not how I like to engage with art, or media in general, right? So,
agreed.
Yeah, but in this case, those are two possible reasons, commonsensical reasons why I think that this kind of stuff is happening, and we can expect more of it from the studios that have not yet been impacted.
Yeah, definitely.
Either that, or we're going to see all of the studios just start selling their games on other platforms too, in order to compensate for these problems.
Right? Yeah, that's going to happen for sure.
Thank you guys very much for tuning in. Those are our thoughts on the recent round of Xbox layoffs. Play your Death Stranding and other
get back to Death Stranding.
Long single player games that you have on the shelf, and take care.